It's been 2 whole years since the very last one, but it's finally time for the highlight of the X-Men year. Get your best outfits on for another Hellfire Gala, of sorts.
What do they call you? Wheels?
Hey everyone, it's Rose here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking all about the one-shot X-Men Hellfire Vigil. It's a massive, jam-packed issue with sections written by various different X-Men creative teams, so there's a lot to discuss. So join me in mourning what we've lost, and then as I break down the fashion, the romance, and the story, along with how this single comic book almost made me quit X-Men comics entirely. And no, that's not even clickbait. The mega-size issue opens with a section all about Miss Marvel, written by NYX authors Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, with art by Javier Garron. Kamala is making her way from New Jersey to New York for the Hellfire Vigil, and is reminiscing about Krakoa, something she only got to experience for an hour or two at best. Just so you're aware, Kamala was murdered by the villain the Emissary, don't worry about it, in Amazing Spider-Man issue 25. But then was resurrected on Krakoa because, as it turns out, she's actually both an Inhuman and a mutant. And her resurrection happened to be on the day of the Third Hellfire Gala. As I've discussed before, a lot happens at this particular gala, and Miss Marvel is quickly inducted into the ranks of the X-Men because she was one of the few heroes that survived Orcus's attack and remained on Earth. As Kamala arrives at Central Park, we get a splash page of the crowd that's gathered for the vigil, both mutant and human alike, and quite a few faces we haven't seen since the end of the Krakoa era. From King of Avalon, Jamie Braddock, to Quiet Council member Exodus, to Eyeboy, to North Star and Aurora, to Rockslide, to Wolfsbane. It's nice to know that all of these characters are still around, and there's plenty more cameos to come. Prodigy welcomes Kamala to the event, and they reconnect, with David mentioning that her parents now know that Kamala is a mutant. This actually occurred in the Giant Size event miniseries, which involved Miss Marvel being dragged through time to pivotal moments in X-Men history by an old man Legion. Don't worry about it. Ultimately, the teen superhero gained a better understanding of the X-Men and of her mutant powers, which are confirmed to be those MCU hardlight powers. And with that, she decides to come out as both a mutant and a superhero to her parents, something which they had forgotten after Emma Frost wiped their minds to protect them during the fall of X. That aside, Anol is here too, and he explains the importance of the Vigil pins that everyone has, by essentially creating a mutant circuit between Prodigy, Sync, Sobernar, and Local. They've actually been able to reactivate Krakoan gates for one night only, and the pin gives you access to those gates. Now, this is such a cool achievement, but it also makes me wonder, why can't this just be a permanent thing? As we see, Mystique, Destiny, Shatterstar, Richter, Forge, and Necra all exit a gate. This particular gate leads to Millennium Park in Chicago, where another part of the vigil is taking place, with Dazzler holding a concert for everyone. We see Laura Kinney and her very close friend, Kaida Nixon,
and they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
Head off to said concert as Kamala tries to find the one person she's closest to in the NYX crew, Sophie Cuckoo. Instead, she bumps into Miles Morales, Spider-Man, one of her dearest friends from her Avengers days, who lets her know that Sophie is actually going to meet Tarnis Moodring tonight. Both as out of their depth as each other, and knowing very few people, Miles and Kamala decide that they will spend the rest of the vigil together. Next, we go over to the Alaskan X-Men team, written by Jed MacKay with art by Netho Diaz. At their base, the factory, Psylocke is surprised to hear that Cyclops will not be attending the vigil, and disapproves, considering that he is the leader of the X-Men, and he should set the example. Despite the mutant memorial / celebration, Scott does not feel like celebrating. In fact, they're losing. 3K is out there with their very own X-Men team. The upstarts are still at large, the Office of National Emergency is waiting for them to fail, and Ellis and Greymalkin have a space laser pointed at their home. All of this, and Canon wants to go to a party. To be fair to Scott, I think he might be deflecting a bit from the fact that in universe, it is also the 1 year anniversary of the Third Hellfire Gala, where he ended up getting beaten by Nazi Captain America, breaking his back, and then spending several months in prison being tortured by Orcus, all while his wife and his family were being murdered, which is a lot to go through. Regardless, Canon does not entertain Cyclops any longer and storms out with the rest of the team, leaving Scott at the base with New Mutant Ben Lee, whose death had been faked, so he can't exactly go out and party. Meanwhile, in Deep Space, we're at the Phoenix section by Stephanie Phillips and Ron Mercado. Jean is all dressed up for the Hellfire Vigil, but her Blackbird suddenly diverts course to another location, as she starts to hear and see ghosts. Her jet arrives in an area of space filled with floating crystals, and after she touches one of these crystals, ghostly forms reappear to Phoenix. They tell her that they left Earth hundreds of years ago to escape persecution and find a place that they could live in peace, because they are mutants. These ghosts did not survive the journey, but their memories did, as they were preserved in these crystals, to serve as both a monument and a beacon for any other mutant who might feel lost. Back with the Alaskan X-Men, Magic drops them all off at the Vigil concert in Chicago before leaving to deal with business of her own. Rob is living for Dazzler, but Quentin's a hater and calls her an industry plant. Now, if she was an industry plant, she wouldn't be flopping half the time. No, if we want to talk about a real industry plant in the Marvel Universe, that would be Luna Snow. But anyways, IDA leaves the group as she has a date with a certain someone, and Quentin starts to regret breaking up with her all the way back in Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 2 in 2014. Meanwhile, Beast and the New Mutant Jen Starkey are getting close. Dazzler is singing one of her songs, Beauty in the Beast, and Jen naively comments that this song could be about Hank, which it actually is. The song is in reference to the 1984 miniseries Beauty and the Beast, where Dazzler and Beast had a bit of a romantic relationship. With the music in the background, Hank admits he admires Jen for her strength, since her X gene and her physical mutation developed when she was an adult. But she reveals it's actually quite comforting to speak to someone that's been through the exact same situation. And they hold hands. Ah, love! Which is really interrupted by Quentin, who is obviously quite jealous because all of his relationships have been failures. Next, we go over to the X-Force section, written by Jeffrey Thorne, with art by Marcus Toe. Colossus, who had been revealed to be the mysterious Tank in X-Force issue 10, has gotten John Rafe to teleport him back to his hometown in Siberia. It's been a long time since 1975, however, and the land is now abandoned. Arriving at his childhood home, Piotr reminisces on the past, about his parents, his brother when he was just an astronaut, his dream to be a painter. He then recalls Charles Xavier asking him to join the X-Men, and how his life has been war, battle, and death ever since. And honestly, he's not even exaggerating. From being forced to murder, to seeing his little sister kidnapped by a demon, to having his parents murdered, to his sister dying of the legacy virus, to his brother being evil, to being under the influence of cosmic and demonic beings, he's been through a lot of trauma. Wraith advises Colossus to push back when other people try to force him to be something he's not, and leaves him to think on things. As Magic arrives, the siblings embrace, and Piotr reassures Illyana that his time on X-Force is over. Magic questions him over his suit and helmet, which Colossus explains as having built-in telepathy blocking, as him becoming mind-controlled had become quite a problem. See, previously, throughout the entirety of the Krakoan era, Colossus had been under the influence of a mutant known as the Chronicler, who was being directed by Colossus's own brother, Mikhail Rasputin. Now, whilst he was being controlled, Piotr did several bad things, including murdering his girlfriend Layla, leaking state secrets to Russia, and even preventing X-Force from intervening at the Third Hellfire Gala when Orcus attacked. But with this fresh start, Illyana gives Piotr a brand new suit and teleports him to Central Park so he can spend the Hellfire Vigil with his family without any disguises. Back in Chicago, we have the Uncanny X-Men by Gail Simone and Luciano Vecchio. Rogue and her entire team reunite with the Alaskan X-Men, and the groups share compliments of each other, like Alaskan X-Clam and Louisiana Hot. These words have never been said in this order before, and they certainly shouldn't be said by Psylocke, of all people. Rogue notices that Scott is missing, but Canon reassures that it's nothing to do with her. And with that, the Uncanny X-Men go off into their pairs. Rogue and Gambit, Jitta and Calico, and well, Psylocke decides to teach Deathdream how to dance in a very wholesome moment. Meanwhile, Temper is meeting with Ransom, and they immediately hit it off. Valentin is completely smitten with IDA, and she is all for it. Ah, more love! They end up telling each other their histories for 90 minutes, and when they eventually make it back to their groups of X-Men, they make out in front of everyone, with Rogue and Canon bantering about this being a Romeo-Juliet situation, but hopefully with a happier ending.
Plague on both your houses!
Also, I think it's important to shout out Luciano Vecchio for including several other X-Men characters throughout this sequence, including Ascani, Captain Britain and Polaris, Katasai, Karma and Beak, and Wolfsbane and Tommy the Morlock. At the same time, we have the Exceptional X-Men section, written by Eve Ewing with art by Frederica Manchin. As this is technically a Dazzler concert, there is Dazzler merch everywhere, and Axo, Bronze and Melee are desperate to find some good Dazzler shirts, though are unlucky with the unofficial merch stands. The trio then phase through the crowd to try and find a good spot for the concert, and really revel in the moment that they are surrounded by people who are just like them. But the wholesome moment is short-lived when Axo's phone starts ringing, and he rushes off to meet Sophie Cuckoo. Ah, even more love! Across the city, Kitty Pryde is working at Lulu's Tavern, and Iceman is there to keep her company. He is trying to convince her to visit the vigil, if only for a minute, but she just won't do it. She needs time to grieve alone, and seeing as it's also the 1-year anniversary of her becoming the violent murderer Shadowcat, it makes sense to me. Back at the concert, Emma Frost takes the stage to give a speech to the mutant crowd. She rallies everyone and tells them that although Krakoa is no longer here, Krakoa lives within all of them, and no one can take that away from them. On to the Astonishing X-Men section, written by Alex Packnadle, with art by Philip Sevy. Husk and Skin are in the crowd reacting to their former teacher's speech. Paige is moved, whilst Angelo is a bit sceptical that Emma didn't use her telepathy to make people cry, and goes to ask their other former teacher, Banshee, his thoughts. Sean is not dressed up, by the way, because he didn't plan to come to the vigil. He did not thrive on Krakoa, to put it lightly. And it wasn't until one of the fair folk convinced him that he tagged along at the very last minute, as seen in the Infinity comic Astonishing X-Men issue 27. Banshee is distracted because he's hearing some beautiful singing that no one else can hear. And he quickly realises what it means. Running off into the crowd, he finds his daughter, Siren, who is still a trustee of the Grey Malcolm prison. She has been sent here as a cruel test from Warden Ellis, and once Banshee tries to convince her that she can still come home, Terry just recites the brainwashing that she's been told and threatens to hurt people before vanishing into the night. Now, I do find it incredibly crazy that there's hundreds of mutants gathered here partying whilst there's still an active mutant prison that exists. Like, why don't they all just rock up on the mansion now and sort it out? Even just with Siren, all these powerful mutants around her and no one decides to free her? It's not like it'd be hard. Theoretically, Dazzler could neutralise Teresa all by herself. Anyways, speaking of Dazzler, we're onto her section now, written by Jason Lowe with art by Sarah Pichelli. Dazzler is in the middle of her set when her head of security, Domino, contacts her to let her know that Warden Ellis of the Grey Malkin prison has sent dozens of Sentinel dogs after her. The mutant pop star knows she only has time for one more song, and so decides to stand her ground by singing the last Krakoan dream, all about Krakoa, before they eventually will teleport out via their guitarist, Lila Cheney. As Domino deals with the Sentinel dogs from Grey Malkin prison, she also gets ambushed by the Office of National Emergency, who have sent dozens of guards too. So the rest of Dazzler's backstage crew, Strong Guy, Multiple Man and Wind Dancer, jump into the fight as well. Whilst they manage to hold the squads back for a bit, Strong Guy and Multiple Man are knocked out, and a Sentinel dog manages to evade Domino and make its way onto the stage, taking out Lila Cheney. With no escape, the one agent arrests Dazzler in front of a crowd. Domino, Wind Dancer and Shark Girl are all ready to fight back, and the crowd, which includes some of Dazzler's closest friends, North Star and Pixie, boo and heckle the agents. But Dazzler tells them all to stand down, as she doesn't want any more violence or bloodshed, and so she submits, being teleported away to become an inmate of Grey Malkin prison. Now, I have to pause here because this moment right here is the reason I almost quit reading X-Men comics going forward. Why? Well, I think this choice to have Dazzler martyr herself, accept an unlawful arrest, and then have hundreds of superpowered beings just stand there and boo is the perfect encapsulation of everything I have disliked about this era, and just goes to show the complete misunderstanding Marvel currently have of what the X-Men represent. I think painting this message that you shouldn't fight back against oppression or unlawful violence or unlawful arrest and just stand there and watch it happen is so dangerous, and particularly is so wrong, especially when you consider current events going on at the moment. But even without that, I think protesting against oppression or fascism or authoritarianism is just a timeless message. The X-Men as a series have had their ups and downs in terms of quality, but even in their worst eras, the Inhumans vs. X-Men era, the Resurrection era, the Decimation, the X-Men always fought back. And suddenly, they have no spine? They're just going to lie down and take the oppression and not resist? The X-Men have become so toothless and so spineless that they can't even stand up for their own people anymore. And I don't understand how anyone at Marvel saw that page and thought, yes, this is what the X-Men are about. This is what the X-Men would do. Because that page was completely unrecognisable to me. On a lighter note, we next have the Storm section, written by Murewa Ayodele with art again by Luciano Vecchio. It opens with Storm reflecting on her mother, Nadir, both alive and when she died, whilst floating in the upper atmosphere, before tearfully proclaiming that she herself is going to be a mother.
You sound like a mother.
Going back to earlier in the day, Aurora visited a drugstore to receive a pregnancy test, which the cashier loudly announces to the entire shop. As Storm leaves, the cashier then does this again for the next customer, and this pushes Storm to confront the worker over their manners. In the present, at the Storm Sanctuary, Gateway and Manifold have opened up portals to allow guests inside the base, in a panel that feels very reminiscent to the arrival of the X-Men's villains on Krakoa in House of X, issue 5. These guests include Callisto, Jumbo Carnation, Gentle, Frenzy, Armor, and some obscure mutants like Flourish and Abeni. Maggot is also here, but he's been relegated to kitchen staff as he's dishing out food for the guests. Now we have a completely new section of the Hellfire Vigil, set in a completely different part of the country, if it wasn't confusing enough already. Storm gathers everyone for a rallying speech around remembering the greatness they achieved while on Krakoa, and remembering Krakoa itself forever. In a complete reference to Storm's iconic announcement of mutant resurrection, also in House of X, issue 5. Mireille clearly loves a reference to Hoxpox. After the speech, Aurora is crying in the bathroom as the pregnancy test she bought earlier reveals that she is not pregnant, thereby confirming that her recent fling with Logan in Storm issue 3 has not resulted in anything. She finds herself struggling to continue as the future remains bleak and hopeless, and that's when Eternity, the cosmic entity that is still using Storm as its host, decides to show her a glimpse of the future to provide her with the drive to continue on. In this vision, there is a young girl who shows the date and time to be the 16th of June at 6:16 AM, an obvious reference to the main 616 timeline, and reveals that she is the daughter of Aurora Monroe. She has her father's black hair, fangs and powers, but she also has her mother's distinctive blue eyes and powers as well. And finally, she tells Storm that her name is Furaha, which means joy in Swahili, the native language of Kenya. All this brings Earth's mightiest mutant to tears. Happy tears, at least. But the real question on everyone's mind, who is the father? Frankly, there are two clear options based on the information provided and their history with Aurora. Number one, it's T'Challa, the Black Panther, Storm's ex-husband and sometime lover. He has black hair, and since he also has cat-like reflexes, it's not impossible to draw a connection to fangs. Number two, it's Wolverine, one of Storm's closest friends, ex-lover, and her most recent physical relationship. He also has black hair and is sometimes depicted having fangs, or sharp teeth. However, there are some other possibilities, like Blade, a half-vampire with black hair and fangs, but he doesn't really have a close relationship with Storm, ever. Or, to throw a curveball into the mix, maybe it's Morbius, a scientific vampire with black hair and fangs. Either way, this is a sudden plot development for Aurora, as throughout the Storm series, she has shown no interest or desire in being a mother. But it is an interesting story to explore. 616 Storm has rarely engaged with motherhood. The only time that I can think of is when her daughter from the future, Chimera, came to the present and stayed around. However, their relationship was very strained. It's important to note that Jonathan Hickman famously intended for Storm to discover her pregnancy in the Giant-Size X-Men Jean Grey and Emma Frost issue. This would have been a child between her and T'Challa that would have been raised in the temporal bubble of the World facility and aged up. The child of two kingdoms, Wakanda and Krakoa, and a version of Azari from Next Avengers, the animated movie. However, due to Black Panther plans at the time, this story was changed last minute. So this new tease from Ayodele feels like another attempt at this story. But what do you think about Storm being a mother, and who do you think is the father to Furaha? Let me know down below in the comments. And finally, we're back in Alaska. Cyclops and Ben Liu are alone in the factory when Phoenix arrives. Scott and Jean embrace. They haven't interacted in person since Giant-Size X-Men issue 2. And he explains that he's opposed to the Vigil because it just feels like a way for everyone to tell each other that they are okay with losing. And he's not. This feels like an incredibly justified and accurate position, considering that Dazzler just got arrested at the Vigil and everyone just let it happen. But Jean argues that it's not about what they've lost, it's about what they still have and holding on to it. And what they all have is each other. And with that, a live stream is suddenly broadcast to everyone at the Hellfire Vigil. It's from the organisation 3K, who urge mutants to reject how things are and reject the X-Men, labelling them as pretenders. They showcase footage from X-Men issue 18, where Magneto utilised a giant sentinel to defeat a mutant who was being manipulated by Cassandra Nova, in an attempt to paint the X-Men as anti-mutant. 3K then reveal that their goal is to transform Earth into a new Krakoa by the year 3000, hence the name 3K, and reveal themselves to the world. Wire, Cassandra Nova, the Chairman, and Astra, along with a new Joseph, clone of Magneto, with 3K announcing themselves the Hellfire Vigil is over. Now, before I get into the review of the comic, I just quickly want to do a bit of a fashion review for the outfits of the Hellfire Vigil, seeing who wore it best and who should have just stayed at home. Starting with Psylocke, she has a very simple outfit, but it's also very elegant and classy, and she's serving. So I think she's one of the winners of the night. Next we have Phoenix. Now, it's not her worst outfit, but it's also not her best. And the layers of green upon green with the yellow, it's kind of giving Christmas tree to me. Magic's outfit is very understated for her, actually, but it still feels recognisably Magic, so it's somewhere in the mid-range. Colossus' outfit is quite similar. It's not bad by any means, but it's also not groundbreaking or breathtaking at all. It doesn't even have the sex appeal of his original Hellfire Gala outfit. So it's also another mid-look. Temper's outfit gets higher marks because it actually has a bit of colour and a bit of personalisation to it. And I really appreciate that in this sea of black and white. You can tell that Axo is being mentored by Kitty Pryde because his outfit is quite hodgepodge. There's a bunch of different elements going on, from the spikes to the tartan to the bow tie. But I also appreciate it in its edgy, emo punk way. I appreciate Emma's outfit, but it does feel a little pedestrian, a little school librarian. I understand this is the Vigil, so she can't really go all out like she could at the Hellfire Gala, but there just needed to be a little something more to it, you know? But she is right at the bottom because he didn't even bother dressing up. And that yellow shirt is low-key kind of ugly. Husk, on the other hand, really surprised me with this look. It's not what I expected from her, but it's amazing. It fits in with the Hellfire Vigil theme of black and white, but it just has a little extra wow factor to it, or X factor, if you will. Definitely one of the best looks of the night. Frankly, Dazzler's outfit is disappointing to me. I know she can do better. We've seen her do better. It's just lacking any of that Dazzler pizzazz. It's literally just a poncho, and it's not even flattering. She could have at least put some rhinestones or gemstones on it to make it sparkle, but there's none of that. Rogue's outfit is a green corset with a skirt and thigh-high boots. It doesn't really have a lot of elegance, but it also doesn't have the bombast that I've come to expect with Rogue looks. It feels a little tacky, and I know she can do better. And finally, we have Storm's outfit, which is something I would never have expected from Aurora. The Michael Jackson plus military leader combo is different, but it actually kind of fits the vibe Storm has in the issue. The cap is cool, the cape is cool, the hair is amazing, and the leathery material, I guess, fits with Storm. She does have a history with leather, after all. Now, it doesn't top the iconic Hellfire Gala look, but it does stand out amongst the sea of plain suits and dresses. But what do you think of the fashion at the Hellfire Vigil? What are your favourites? What are your least favourites? Let me know down below in the comments. So X-Men Hellfire Vigil had me cautiously optimistic when it was first announced. The thought of returning to a beloved concept from Krakoa with mutantkind reuniting felt like a step in the right direction after the From the Ashes era. But it left me feeling worse. Now don't get me wrong, there was a lot to enjoy. McKay and Diaz's X-Men pages, with Cyclops explaining his position on the Hellfire Vigil, to 3K coming out swinging at the end. They were examples of incredible storytelling. I really love seeing all of the various romances blossoming, with Ransom and Temper, Jitter and Calico, Beast and Jen Starkey, and even the mutant speeches from Emma and Storm were positive. However, the idea that all of these mutants were gathered in one place, celebrating, partying, and choosing not to deal with Grey Malcolm Prison around the corner, which had previously been overrun by just 2 X-Men teams, lingers over this book like a bad shadow. Couple that with Siren's appearance at the Vigil and Dazzler being arrested publicly without a fight, I think it just speaks volumes as to what Marvel thinks the X-Men should stand for and should represent. Compliance in the face of authoritarianism, oppression, and fascism, which is just completely wrong on every single fundamental level. Of course, I didn't end up quitting these books. I'm still here making this video, aren't I? But it's not really a good sign if your book is making readers even contemplate quitting. But what are your thoughts on the Hellfire Vigil? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Who do you think was the best and worst dressed of the night? Who do you think the father of Storm's baby is? And what do you think about the current stance of the X-Men books? Let me know down below in the comments, and I'll see you all in the next video.